So here we find ourselves having a little bit of a chat after the Jazz ended up closing out a close one, really in interesting fashion, considering the fact that I believe they were down by as much as 17 in their summer league game. But they battled their way back, ended up late by a couple points, and then even though there was a buzzer beater in favor of the Memphis Grizzlies, it ended up being ruled a 2 instead of a 3, so they lost by 1 point. Obviously, in interestingly heartbreaking fashion for them, but for us, that's pretty good, you know? Obviously, there was also the 3 team trade that happened, and I didn't end up talking about that in the live stream because it ended up happening literally within 24 hours after that, when we were talking about the fact that we assumed John Collins would be the next guy on the chopping block and the most likely to be traded. I don't expect anybody else that was a core member of last year's unit to be traded now going forward. So I would assume Larry Markkinen, Walker Kessler, even Keontae George and all those guys. I think all of them are pretty safe and cemented. At the same time, I do see a world where we might end up trading away Kyle Anderson or maybe even Kevin Love in the right situation if we don't decide to buy him out. Though I think his veteran leadership and understanding of the game, particularly as a stretch big, would be very useful to guys like Hal Filipowski, and maybe he could make Walker Kessler an effective free throw shooter for all I care. Overall, it would be nice to see. Now, the full details of the trade, it was between the Clippers, the Jazz, and the Heat. Originally, I predicted that the Heat would be the ones to get John Collins, but because it was a 3-team trade, obviously that didn't end up being necessarily the case, which is perfectly fine. I think the Clippers definitely got better by adding on John Collins, and it creates a new interesting dynamic for them. Obviously, they have a healthy Kawhi, they have a healthy James Harden, so on and so forth. They have Chris Dunn from a recent deal, I believe it was a sign and trade with the Utah Jazz that ended up bringing him over there. They still have Zubac, so they're in really, really good waters. They got better, and it was necessary because if they're going to compete in the West this upcoming year, they needed more firepower. And I think John Collins' efficiency from beyond the arc, being a lob threat, and defensively being consistent enough to be playable means that they definitely got to check something off of one of their boxes. So Norman Powell ended up going to Miami. John Collins went to Los Angeles, and we got Kevin Love, Kyle Anderson, and a 2027 Clippers second-round pick, which I guess is the silver lining because in the last deal with Colin Sexton, we just ended up adding an extra player just to get Nurkic, added a draft pick just to get Nurkic, and it just didn't really make sense to me. I felt like there was a drastic difference in the amount of quality that was being exchanged right there, but we needed to take on a contract that could either be bought out or just, have a player that can sit on the bench and you can reasonably tell the league offices, hey, he's not better than our young guys, or we personally don't feel like he's working hard enough for XYZ. We just don't think we need to play him. And then you can just have him sitting on the bench the entire year. And since it's on the last year of his contract, he's out the door regardless right afterwards. I think Norman Powell to the Heat is a very interesting pickup, and it definitely makes them a better team. Does it make them a contender in the East? Heck no. Does it make them a guaranteed playoff team in the East? Also heck no. But I think having him alongside Bam Adebayo, I guess Terry Rozier, and a couple of those guys would make things more interesting and would make the games more watchable for fans if you are one of the Miami Heat by proxy. On to some slightly more spicy things that will provide us with a little bit of insight for this upcoming season. I wanted to go ahead and just do a quick little recap of the Summer League game because I thought that it was very interesting. Not just the fact that we managed to come back from a significant double-digit, hole, but also the fact that the guys stayed consistent, the effort was consistent. We only ended up playing 8 guys compared to last time when we played 9 guys. Somehow Elijah Harkless still ended up making that 8-guy rotation. I am not very high on him, obviously, and I don't care to see him in an official Jazz jersey come regular season time, but you never know. Some guys may turn that switch and it may hit. The story today, though, was Bryson Sabal showing why he doesn't need to play the rest of the Summer League. The man went for 37, 4, and 1. He also had 2 steals. However, he did have 5 turnovers and 6 personal fouls, so we can't leave those out. But at the same time, he was 9 of 14 from the field and 6 of 9 from three-point range. So he was on a heater the entire time. The passes he was receiving from Isaiah Collier, from Cody Williams, from basically everybody, the ball was going up, and he felt extremely comfortable letting that thing fly, whether it was from mid-range, whether it was from beyond the arc, whether it was cutting to the basket off of a flare screen. He was just getting into the action and making sure he was heavily involved. So if this is any indicator, I believe this year he's going to have a very much increased offensive role come regular season time. I would argue that he's definitely at this point more potent as an offensive weapon than Keontae George is, or any of the other young players. You could argue that somebody could have greater value later on down the line, but to me, games like this and the fact that he was able to replicate this after going off in the first summer league game with extremely high efficiency. Granted, again, these aren't NBA caliber starters and all-stars. We know that. But at the same time, these are still guys that have that dog in them, that have the desire to make a team, that are trying to prove why the team should at the very least give them an opportunity to play, whether it be with the G League affiliated team with that team, or to have the opportunity to play with that actual team. And for the Memphis Grizzlies, Gigi Jackson obviously was the one to go off. And honestly, he looked really, really nice. 11 of 18, 3 of 8 from three-point range, 2 of 3 from the free throw line. I forgot to say, Bryce Sensabaugh was 13 of 14 from the free throw line. He was cutting up, doing his best Shai Gilgeous-Alexander impression from there. But, Gigi Jackson led their team with 27 points. You also had Wells and Spencer both coming up next with 23. Spencer, 7 of 14 from the field, 7 of 10 from beyond the arc, to go along with 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 1 block. But he did have 5 turnovers and 5 personal fouls. He did, however, manage to be one of only 2 starters to have a positive box score plus minus. So that's also something to keep in mind. And then, of course, for Wells, 6 of 18 from the field, 4 of 11 from 3, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, a board, 2 assists, a steal, and only 2 turnovers, but 7 personal fouls. So there was a whole lot going on in this game. Obviously, I wanted to highlight Bryce Sensabaugh. I considered how I wanted to format this, and it's just going to end up being me spilling out the thoughts that popped into my head instead of categorizing them. However, I did want to focus on 2 key deficiencies across the Jazz lineup that I saw. Kyle Filipowski, we knew, was going to be a bad defender as a 5-man. Even in a small ball situation, you don't want him to be the person protecting the paint because he has no vert. He has no extreme athleticism. He's kind of sneaky athletic when he gets a pass while he's cutting to the rim on the fast break, and he ended up flushing a couple of those. He even went down the court off an inbounds pass and ends up doing a little behind the back tween cross, gets to the rim and just hammers that thing home. And I didn't think he had it in him because he gives off the energy of somebody that would score in the ways that Jokic does. A whole lot of layups and a whole lot of floaters, honestly. But he managed to show off some of his athleticism. However, there was just too many times where he was either getting blown by or he was playing hands-up defense and it just didn't affect the shot. So the fact that it was so glaring and showing in front of my eyes was something that I wasn't really expecting. It was always possible. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, wow, this was just the last thing I ever saw on my bingo card for 2025, because it wasn't. But it was still interesting enough for me to scratch my head and say, I didn't think it was that bad, basically, if that makes sense. Now, in the game overall, he shot really bad, actually. 4 of 12 from the field, 0 of 3 from three-point range. He was 3 of 4 from the free throw line, but he also managed to grab 13 rebounds, with 5 of them being offensive, to go with 1 assist, 3 steals, a block, and 4 turnovers, along with 4 personal fouls. So nothing too magnificent. He was just kind of out there trying to do his job to the best of his ability. Again, the shooting wasn't there. I think that it will eventually come. I think the consistency with it will continue to come because, again, he's just going into his second year. And if what Keontae George and Walker Kessler went through is any indicator, it could potentially be a rough second year. Moving on, you had Cody Williams having a surprisingly solid game, going 6 of 10 from the field, 1 of 3 from three-point range. He was 5 of 5 from the free throw line. Also put together 2 boards, only 1 turnover, 3 personal fouls to go along with 1 block, 18 points, which was tied for second most on the team with Ace Bailey. You also have Isaiah Collier being that other guy that started 5 of 8 from the field, did miss the 1 3 that he took, but he only took 1 3, so that's an improvement. He also shot 3 of 7 from the free throw line, which was mildly concerning. to go along with no rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, 5 turnovers, and 4 personal fouls. So a little bit of a hodgepodge of everything, just a nice little smorgasbord of literally everything that you could possibly touch, with the exception of rebounds on his plate. Going to the bench unit, you had Walter Clayton Jr. in 25 minutes of action. He really didn't get that many shots up. He was 1 of 4 overall, 1 of 3 from the three-point line, and 1 of 2 from the free throw line. He did manage to have 3 rebounds and 6 assists to go along with a steal, a block, and 6 personal fouls. So again, really interesting stuff. However, he had the highest box score plus minus as a positive 11. So perhaps him sharing the rock as much as he did had a higher impact on the shot consistency than was originally anticipated, but just something to keep an eye on. You then have Sanogo and Harkless together combining for 2 of 4 from the field. Harkless missed both of his threes. However, he did get to the free throw line a lot. He was 7 of 9 from there. And then they collectively had 4 rebounds, 2 steals, no blocks, 4 turnovers, and 8 personal fouls split between them, with Sanogo having 5. And then that brings me to Ace Bailey. And I had to look up his age to make sure that I wasn't going to sit here and glaze him while he's still a minor, because we don't do that. And honestly, I don't glaze people just in general. But watching him play, you could tell he loves basketball. And before, I'm not going to say I had a question about it, but I thought that he was just kind of doing it because he was good at it and he liked to see other people struggle against him. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was an ego thing. But now watching him play today, the energy was off the charts. Him flying up and down the court, making sure he's available for outlet passes, cleaning up the glass, making sure he grabs the board with 2 hands convincingly, to the point where you hear him grab the board on the audio mic that's, a lot of feet away. Overall, he was just really, really good in this one, to the tune of him shooting 7 of 14 from the field. He was also 3 of 5 from three-point range, 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 7 boards, with 4 of them being offensive. He didn't have any steals, blocks, or turnovers, but he did have 4 personal fouls. And again, like I said, he was tied for 18 as a box score plus minus. One thing that really stood out to me about his particular play today as well was, at one point, I want to say it was like with 8-ish minutes left in the fourth quarter, or it might have been the third quarter. Either way, later on in the game, he ends up in the corner, and it looks like it's a fast break. They're trying to attack before, obviously, the defense gets set. Pass goes from the left wing across the court to the right corner where he's standing. He immediately lines that thing up and splashes it without question. And seeing that was kind of funny, but also really awesome, considering the fact that, he wasn't anticipating to get that much notoriety off of that simple thing alone. But again, so anybody can have the opportunity to showcase their best skills and what they have to offer to any team, organization, or just individual person. And that's just how it has to be. Obviously, making sure that all the players got their due minutes and also executed as much as they could to the best of their abilities is something that was really riding on this coaching staff. But I feel like they managed to do it, even though they, again, came out really sluggish to start the game out. And it felt like more of a your turn, my turn kind of offense. And when certain guys started missing and they also couldn't buy a stop on the other side of the ball, things got ugly pretty quickly. One thing about Ace Bailey that really stood out to me was when he was standing in the corner that time, and he did it just the same way that we saw Klay Thompson do it a few years back, with a no-dip jumper. Basically, he caught the ball within his shooting pocket and just rose from there. He caught it like right here, about at his right eye level, catches the pass, immediately goes up with it. There's no lowering. There's no bringing it down to the hip. There's no adjusting the lines in the ball. He just let that thing fly as if he knew. And he did, to his credit, end up cashing out on that one. I wonder if it was a bit of a fluke, or if that's just really something that he tends to do and something that he's just genuinely capable of at any point in the day, 24/7. Nevertheless, I think that it's really important, even though, the jerseys behind me, with the exception of Lowry's, are, behind the times now. It's nice to keep track of some of the players that you had on your roster as they slowly leave, or as they come back to the city and they're looking for love or whatever, just being able to appreciate those guys because they put in a lot of work to make sure everybody can be successful and everybody can do their own individual thing. Now, if you look at it from the standpoint of the Jazz front office, I think they're pretty content where they're at. I think they should make a trade because everybody keeps talking about how they have 1.5 million power forwards and centers, but I think that it's in their best interest to go ahead and find some quick solutions to these problems in the most respectful way possible, of course. Honestly, I didn't want to take up too much of anybody's time because I didn't have any crazy amount of information, but I did have something that I wanted to talk about. And considering the fact that I just got off a 10, 11-hour shift, my brain isn't necessarily functioning at 100% efficiency. Another thing to cover, though, is when I usually do live streams and the VODs automatically update, I can't adjust the volume there. So I do my best during the stream to make sure I boost the levels without dropping my suppressor down too low, because at that point it will literally pick up every single time I take a deep breath, every time my chair creaks, every time somebody walks past my area as well. And that's just not very fun for anybody. I believe that we will have an enjoyable season and things will get done because they have to get done nevertheless. But if you made it this far in the video, first of all, I appreciate you. Smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, drop comments in the section below. Let me know the next video topic that you feel comfortable with listening to. And if you have any interesting stuff, any interesting stories or thoughts to share, by all means, I'll always be all ear as long as I see you. With that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're in the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.